Directional CG here. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to build two remote systems that will allow you to trigger any system by looking up or down then up. So basically, they're directional based systems. So these systems are very neat, and like I said, the point of them is to allow you to trigger the systems that you want to trigger. I have two example systems that I'm going to show you, but the idea is that these systems are for you to customize to activate any system that you would like to. Now first I'm going to set my home right here so that I can bounce back to the spot when I need to. And you can check out my latest set home video that I just released, and I'll link that above. It's also in the description below. Okay, so these two systems mirror each other, but they're opposites. So basically, one system is a down-up system, where I look down, then up to trigger a system. And the other system, as you can imagine, is an up-down system, where I look up, then down to trigger a different system. So I've actually built in basically training wheels into these systems, if you will. So the way this works is you look in the direction for 1 second, and then you look in the opposite direction for the next second. And if you do that fast enough, then you'll trigger the system. And systems are intelligent enough to realize that you haven't done it quick enough. And if you don't do that directional input quick enough, where you look up then down or down then up, if you don't do that fast enough, the system will actually reset your input, and you'll have to redo the input. That way you don't get any false positives. We don't want the system ever activating when you don't intend for it to activate. Otherwise you'll be activating code that you don't want to activate at the wrong times. So it's very important that we don't do that. So here is an example of what I've connected to these systems. So again, you can do anything with this, but in this case, I've made it so the up-down system will actually let players teleport back to the world spawn, so the hub of the world. So this, as you can imagine, is super cool because you don't need any items for a system like this, of course. That's the whole point of it. But at any point in time, I can look up, and then down, and I'm back to spawn, just like that. Super easy, and it works flawlessly. Now we can go back to my home, which is way over here. Okay, so now the other system, again, this is just for fun. It's set up to do something quite a bit different. So as you can see, I don't have any elytra on me currently, but with this other system, if I look down then up quick enough, then not only will I get an elytra, but I'll get a massive jump boost to fly into the sky. So let's check that out. Here we go. And I already have the elytra on me. See this? So now I have the elytra, and we're good to go. Alright, so that's very cool. Again, very OP, but again, you can do whatever you want, as balanced or OP as you like. If you really want to, and you knew what you're doing with coding, you could even add a cost to these systems, where if the player inputs it, they can only activate the system if they have enough money, or enough items, or a diamond, or whatever. You can do that, all sorts of things. It's all different possibilities here. I'm just going to show you the bare bones so you can activate whatever you choose. It is important to note that these systems need to be built on ticking area so that they always work anywhere in the world. Ticking area, if you don't know, I sound like a broken record by this point, but a ticking area is a location that you set by code that is always loaded and running, so that crops will still grow and command blocks will still issue commands, and they don't unload. They don't unload when the chunks would normally get unloaded. So they stay active. So that way that you can be as far away as you want. You can be hundreds of thousands of blocks away if you want. It doesn't matter. The commands will still run. Okay, so here's how you would do that. So we're going to do ticking area, add, we'll type in circle, and then 3 tildes. Now we're going to choose the radius. The max is 4, and that's actually in chunks. So this is actually quite a large area. So it's 4 chunks in all directions from where you're standing. So 4 chunks all around you will be loaded, which is quite large. And now you just need to name it. So you can name it whatever you want. Name it something that makes sense that you'll remember. In this case, I'll just call it commands. If I click enter, of course, that will be made. You have a maximum of 10 different ticking areas that you can have. So use them wisely. And don't overuse them. Like if you only use them when you need them, because technically the more ticking areas you have and the more stuff going on, I guess the more slowdown or performance it would take on a realm or server. But you'll be fine if you only have a couple of them. You just want to be efficient with when you use them and why. But, okay, so let's check this out. So here is the down-up system. Okay, let's go into game mode creative. And here we need a couple scoreboards for each system. So it's pretty simple, but just copy what I do here. Impulse, again, this you don't actually need to enter this as a command block. If you really want to, you could. If you wanted to have it sitting here just so you can visually see it, sure, great, you can do that. In this case, it's just impulse unconditional needs redstone. But all you really need to do is enter this command exactly how you see it in chat, and it will create a scoreboard called the DU trigger, which is down up trigger. Okay, so we need that scoreboard, and we also need to add 0 to all players on that scoreboard. So this is something that we would actually always need to be active, and you can have it. You can have it in a repeating command block like this if you choose to. Repeat unconditional, always active, and here we're going to add players to that scoreboard because this system requires the players to have a score of 0 on the down up trigger, and same with the up down trigger. They need a score of 0 in order for the system to actually target them and to use them in the code. If they don't have a score of 0, then the system can't recognize that they exist, and nothing will happen. So I'll show you a very simple way to make sure that all players are always added to it, which is right here. Again, I've showed you this in pretty much every video I make now, it seems. But I will go on and show you that near the end, I guess. But okay, so you also need a scoreboard called trigger timer. And here we go. Just copy that, okay? So you're gonna have to have to pause when you need to, because I'm gonna go kind of quick through these commands. I don't want to take forever. So I'm not gonna explain these in depth. Just know that they work, and if they don't work for you, it's because you messed up with typing them in properly. You shouldn't even change any of the names. Just keep everything the same exact as I've done it here. There's no reason to change anything, honestly. The only thing it'll change is the stuff that I'll explain to you. Okay, so repeat unconditional, always active, and just go ahead and enter this command. And then this is the one command in both systems that is entirely optional. So this is notify down, and then over here we're going to have notify up. And what that is that's the training wheels of the system that's what I've been calling it. And basically that just notifies the player when they've looked in either direction long enough to then look in the opposite direction to trigger the system. So in the case of the down up system, you'll notice that when I look down, you're going to hear a beeping sound, like a little chime at a certain point. That means that I've looked down long enough, now I can look up. So pay attention. So you heard that little beep. That means that I looked down for long enough, and I could now switch and look straight up to trigger the system. So now I'll do that again. Now look up. Great, and you can see I activated it. So that's great. But that can be annoying if you always have this here. If you always have that little training wheel block here that just helps you to learn the timing, then it can be annoying because this is what will happen if you don't intend to activate the system. So you'll look in a direction, and every time 1 second has been met, or a certain time passes and the system resets, it's actually longer than a second, then you'll hear that chime again and again. Every time that the counter resets, it'll make that chime again and again. So as you can see, that's pretty annoying. So that would happen anytime you're all looking almost fully up and almost fully down. And that's clearly, I wouldn't want that, honestly. That's kind of annoying. So I think it's good to have that just to learn the timings. And once you learn the timings, you can go ahead and remove this command block and move these two right down. But or if you want, you can just forego this command block, get rid of it right now, and just add these two in its place, and you'll be good to go. It doesn't affect anything. That's just there for helping you learn the timing, hence the training wheels. Okay, so again, we'll look at this. Repeat unconditional, always active. Again, copy the code, and now here's the temporary. Not temporary. Here's the optional command block. Chain conditional, always active, and type that. And now looking up, so chain conditional, always active, and this is just now the looking up portion of the code. Just enter this as you see it. And now this one's fine. This one will never be a problem for you. The final notify command is always going to be fine. So chain conditional, always active, and here you can enter this. Now the reason this is fine is because this will only trigger at the point that the player has reached the maximum count necessary to activate the system. So that will never happen unless you fully activate the system like this right there. Okay. So you'll never hear that sound accidentally, but this sound right here, the initial training wheel sound, you will hear accidentally all the time if you have that activated. So that's why I would consider removing that. Okay. So now that you've seen the rest of this chain condition always active, blah blah. Here we go. Now that you've seen that, now let's go on to right here. This is the timing component. So here, repeat unconditional always active. Right here, this is the only spot that I would suggest that you can modify if you choose to. So 65 is actually the number of ticks that you have to input this directional input before it resets. So you have 65 ticks, which is, again, 20 ticks is 1 second, so 60 ticks is 3 seconds. So you have just over 3 seconds to input this up and down motion correctly in order to trigger the system. And I felt that was a good value. It gives you enough room to activate the system, but not enough where you're going to activate it accidentally. If you feel like this is not enough time for you, if it's harder to do on a controller for some reason, and you need a larger window to input this directional input, then all you need to do is increase this number to something like 80, 75, something like that. I wouldn't go too high, because what will happen is the higher the window, the longer the period of time that the inputs can be entered, so you'll have accidental inputs happen more frequently. Whereas the way I have it set up currently, it's very, very, like, I don't even think it's possible that you would input it accidentally. I've never had it happen to anyone that I've ever played with. They've never accidentally input this system. They never actually accidentally input the up-down trigger or down-up trigger. So, yeah. Anyway, so just enter this command and keep it at 65 then you can change that if you want to. So here, chain unconditional always active, and just enter this command as you see it. Nothing to change here. And then here, chain unconditional always active. Again, make sure you get all these settings right and all the blocks. Otherwise, you're going to run into issues. And then just copy this command as you see it. Okay. So that's it. That's the whole first system. And now what we need to do in order to actually activate our system. So this is just seeing if we've input the motion to activate something. Now we need to activate the thing we want to activate. So that's what this is. This block right here, you can keep the same. So repeat unconditional always active. And it's saying that once the player has reached the score of 40, which is the number that they need to reach when they look in both directions, then it will add a temporary tag to that player and execute code based on at that player or based on certain criteria. So we're going to, again, select a random player with that score of 40, and now we're going to run through and execute any system we want. In this case, this simple example system is just going to give that player an elytra. It's going to give them a jump boost. It's going to reset their score, because we want to make sure their score does not stay 40. Otherwise, this code will keep on executing at them over and over, and we do not want that. And it's then going to also remove that tag from that player, so the system cannot target them again until they've, of course, reached the proper score in the timer scoreboard. Okay, so let's check this out. So elytra, chain conditional always active, and just, again, if you were going to enter this code exactly as I've done it, then you can do this right here. Again, this is just at this point, this part's all just example code, and you don't actually need this part for the system. This is where from this block on, like all these blocks right here, all these green ones would be your own code that you want to activate, and at the end, these two codes would be the same. So you would still cap the system off with these codes at some place in the system. And here's going to be the jump boost, chain conditional always active. And here I apply that jump boost to the player. And now I'm going to reset the score. So chain unconditional. Again, these last two are unconditional. They're very important that they have to be unconditional. Chain unconditional always active. Here, just enter it like this. Okay. And then remove tag. Chain unconditional always active. Then remove that tag from all players. So really only one player should have this tag, but we want to make sure that if somehow some player disconnected while they had the score and they still had the tag, or something happens weird like that, which shouldn't happen, but if it somehow magically did happen, this would make sure that player gets that tag removed as well. So there won't be any issues. Okay, so so hopefully you understand the gist of it. So basically all we're doing here is we're activating the system. We basically created a system to trigger something else, and that's this block. Then this block basically kicks off that system into motion. So now, after this block, you should have this block right here. And after this block, you would have any commands right here. And then at the end, you would have these two. And again, you can make it more complex than that if you understand what you're doing. This can do pretty much anything you want. And this is entirely multiplayer safe. So if multiple players actually looked up and down at the same exact time, which again is unlikely, but if that somehow happened where in the same game tick they all did the same thing at the same time, and they all reach the proper score to activate the system, they would all be serviced by the system one by one and all be handled appropriately. So that, say they all wanted to teleport back to spawn over there, they would all be handled appropriately and be sent back to spawn one by one, and that would work flawlessly. So I'll go over this at the end. This is, again, optional, but I'll show you that. You do need some form of this system, but I'll show you. So here, this, again, same thing, but inversed. So here's the command blocks that govern the system, the scoreboards, rather. So again, these commands should be entered right into chat. So we're just going to create a scoreboard called up-down trigger. And again, we need to make sure we add 0. So as you can see, actually, when I made that one repeating, you could do that here too. If you weren't going to do what I show you at the end, you can just leave this one as repeating. Always active, unconditional. So this one technically is running all the time, okay? Even though it's on top of this block, I just did it for the sake of space. Technically, has nothing to do with the block below it. You could just place it right here if you wanted. Same with the other ones, actually the same exact thing. It doesn't make a difference because this one's always running no matter what, because again, it's unconditional, always active, and it's repeating, so it's always running even if this guy's not. But anyway, the same thing over there. It's the same exact principle. And right here, we need to add a trigger for this system. So this is a timer for this system. So again, type in this code as you see it. Okay. So coming over here, we're just going to get right to the code. Again, just pause, repeat unconditional, always active, and copy everything as you see it. Again, I'm a broken record by saying I say that so much now. Again, this is the optional command block. You do not need this. This is your training wheels for the system to teach you the timing for how long you need to look up, and in the other systems, how long you need to look down. So if you don't want that training wheel sound to happen every time, then you can go ahead and remove this so it's not annoying you. Anyway, chain conditional, always active. And here's the command. Now, chain unconditional, always active. Again, make sure you get this right. Chain unconditional, always active. Copy this. And finally, once they reach the appropriate score to activate the system, chain conditional, always active, and then we get this score, this command. Okay. All right. So now here's a timer that governs the system. Now this will make sure that if they don't do the input fast enough, it will reset on them. So repeat unconditional, always active, and here's the command. And again, the same note from before applies to the 65, so you can increase it if you need to. Chain unconditional, always active. We're going to run the countdown. And now, chain unconditional, always active, we're going to reset their score if they haven't reached the proper score to activate the system. Okay, now, similarly to before, we have a block back here that will take that player if they've activated the system and then carry out code. So repeat unconditional, always active. And again, we're going to grab a random player who has a score of 40 on the up-down trigger, and we're going to add a temporary tag, the up-down temp tag, and then we're going to run a series of code at that player. It can be any code you want. It doesn't even have to be targeting the player. You can be activating some system and not targeting the player with anything, or whatever you want. It's, again, this is entirely optional. Whatever you activate is up to you. In this case, I'll go ahead and show you my teleport command right here. This little system is set up to teleport back to the spawn. So this will actually, the way I set this up, this will actually work across dimension. So if I was in another and I did this, I would actually, by looking up then down, I would actually teleport back to the overworld. Even in the end, it would work. It doesn't matter what dimension you're in. So chain conditional, always active. So again, this might not make sense to you. I'm not going to go into explaining this too much, but I'm going to link the video. I have a video all about teleporting across dimensions. So if you want a further explanation of how that works, can go ahead and look above. I'll also include it in the description below. But so if you want a description of how this actually works, then go check out that video on teleporting across dimensions, because I'm not going to get into that here. Chain conditional, always active. Again, here's my command for teleporting to my spawn. Here's my spawn location, and then here's the direction I want the player to be facing. Now this system is capped with the same two kinds of commands as before. We want to make sure we end the code with these two unconditional command blocks. Chain unconditional, always active. We're going to make sure we set their trigger score back to 0, because again, their score, I've designed the system to keep their score at 40 until the system services them and does something for them. So that way, if there's like a queue set up. So if 5 players reach a score of 40 at the same time, which means in the same exact game tick, they all look down and up at the same time, which again is incredibly unlikely, but the system can actually smartly handle that situation if that ever happens somehow. But if they all did look up and down at the same time, or down and up at the same time, and all reach a score of 40, which means they activated and triggered the system will only grab one player at a time, and assign each one of them with that tag one at a time, and then go through the code, and then at the end it will set that player their score back to 0. So they will no longer have a score of 40. So the next time around, the system will not be able to target them because they will no longer have a score of 40. So that's how that works, and that's why it's effective. And again, it's why it's very multiplayer safe. So chain unconditional always active, and again, here's that command. Finally, again, of course, remove the tag. So chain unconditional always active. And now we're just going to remove that tag from all players. Now, again, like I said, it's very important that you make sure that you're added to the scoreboard. Otherwise, again, the system's not going to work. So as you can see, you can either have it always running, and you don't technically need it running every tick because it's not that important. Just so long as they eventually get on there. So even if you do like a 3-second delay, that's fine. It's not a big deal. You definitely want a delay in here if you're going to have it always running because it's not critical. Like once that player is on the scoreboard, they're always on there forever. So this becomes a wasted code that runs for no reason every 3 seconds. Again, we don't need like any lag for no reason, so that's why we enter a high delay in there. But there's a smarter way to do this, and that smarter way is right here. So again, this is a typical system that tests for players and runs codes when players join or leave a game. I've shown this a million times because, again, this is a common thing in most of my videos. You only need one system like this. You don't need to have one for each system I make. If I've shown you how to do this before, just go ahead and add these 2 commands on top of the chain on the side of where this observer is facing into. But if this is the first time you've seen this, it's repeat unconditional always active, 0 ticks of delay, test for array. Then we have oh my god, what the heck's it called? A comparator right here. They're pointing to a redstone dust, and the observer is facing the dust with the arrow pointing to the command blocks behind it. And all these command blocks are right here. It's just this command block, and then this command block right here. Same exact command block, same code, but we're going to change the settings a little bit. So it's just going to be the first one at the bottom. It's going to be an impulse unconditional needs redstone. It does not matter the order, but just make sure it's impulse unconditional needs redstone. Again, it doesn't matter if this is the up-down trigger or the down-up trigger first. It doesn't make a difference. And just make sure the code is, you put in this code. Now here, these should all be chain unconditional always active. So scoreboard players, blah, blah, add. Again, you're going to add 0 to all players. So now both of those scoreboards will have the players added to them with a score of 0. So now they will all work. Now this is a really, really common thing that you have to do with scoreboards. Is many scoreboard systems do require the player to be on it in some capacity. Not all, but many do require them to have a score of at least 0 to be targeted. And if a system needs a player to be on the scoreboard to work, then you can just go ahead and pile all of them up here. And just have a whole bunch of, those scoreboards set up like that where it just adds 0 to all different players for all different systems. This doesn't have to be servicing just this one system right here, okay? And you probably just heard those 2 beeps, those chimes just there. Again, that's an example of why I think having these training wheel blocks here that just teach you the timing, that's why I think they're good for timing and teaching you the timing, but to have them always on becomes really annoying kind of quickly. So without them, it's just nice because you never hear beeps until you fully activate the system. All right. And lastly, this might be helpful for you guys too. So when you're actually coding this thing and putting this thing together, it is helpful to set something like this up just temporarily while you're experimenting and testing and running it over and over. So for example, here's an impulse unconditional needs redstone block, and this is all temporary. And now we're going to set all players to an up-down trigger score of 0. And then the same thing with the other scoreboard, so down-up trigger score of 0. And we're setting their score to 0 here because while you're testing and you're looking up and down and like, hey, is it working? Did I make it like him? Is it working yet? Well, you need to make sure that you reset the code in order to make the system work properly, especially while you're building it. If you haven't finished the code and you started inputting directional inputs, you could kind of cause some issues for yourself. So while you're testing, I find it usually helpful to have a command that will reset my score on a scoreboard so I can start fresh. So that's all these commands will do right here. And now this gives you a visual cue, and I can show you that very definitively here. So if you look here, I have an up-down trigger and a down-up trigger, and you can see I did not make remove offline player system here because these are not going to be scoreboards that I ever display like this normally. And previously I had a friend connected, so you can see a player offline. But if you look right here, what's happening here is when you look down, again, it's counting up for a whole second. Of course, oh wait. Oh, that was weird. That was so weird. Anyway, so as you can see, when I look down, it will count to 20, and it cannot exceed 20 at all. And as you can see, it's resetting. It will eventually reset, right? That's what's happening right there. So yeah. So now, in order for me to trigger the system again, I have to it's being forcefully reset on me. That's because I'm not looking up and down fast enough. So if I look down like this, if I look down like this, and then up right away, you can see I've triggered it. And now if I go ahead and display the other system, which is, let's see, up then down, looking down first does nothing. I have to look up first in this case. So I'll look up, and then I look down, and I trigger that system. So I'm back home. I'm gonna switch my game mode to survival to use my home feature. Okay. So anyway, having these set up, these little displays here, can definitely help you to understand what's happening, like with that score. Is your score resetting? Is it working correctly? That's a good diagnostic tool for you. So impulse unconditional needs redstone, and just enter this, and then again impulse unconditional needs redstone, enter this, and that will help you diagnostically check out your system as you're working on it, make sure it's working correctly. But yes, that's everything, guys. Let me know what you think of this video and the system, and if you're going to use it. Again, it can be used to trigger anything you want. It's really only limited by your creativity. So let's clear this. I don't want those wings. Ugh, this is much better. So thanks for watching, guys. Please subscribe, comment, like, share, do all that fun stuff. Yeah, I think that's it. Have a nice day, guys.